Hi, welcome back everyone to Big Wheels Motoring. Today we're going to be doing an insight into Desert X's off-road capabilities. This is going to be an owner's perspective, definitely not a paid review, so I'll try and keep it as brutally honest as possible. I've done about 2,500 odd kilometers on the Desert X so far, and out of which almost 50% of it has been on off-road trails in and around Pune. These trails, from a difficulty standpoint, would be rated somewhere between basic and intermediate, not too extreme, but still pretty exciting trails, right? With loose sand, very unstable terrain. Some spaces where we are actually traversing through foot trails, carving our own path ahead. Completely broken terrain. Big rocks and boulders, so on and so forth. Right, so I feel it's been a good area for us to actually get into the details and nitty-gritties of how the Desert X performs off-road, right? All right, so let's set a template for this assessment before we jump right in, so it kind of puts some method to the madness, and discuss this further. So what parameters would define a good or bad off-road motorcycle? If you ask me, I think, there are about 9 odd parameters which I've chalked down, which I feel are extremely crucial and critical for us to understand how a particular motorcycle performs off-road, right? The first one is a good long suspension travel. The second one is excellent suspension setup, right? With good preload, rebound and compression. The third one would be a good high ground clearance. Fourth one would be excellent knobby, grippy tires. Fifth one would be power delivery, right? So it should not be too high on power, which will basically, give us wheel spins and lack of tractions. At the same time, it should be high on torque to give consistent low speed traction while on the go, right? So power delivery is the fifth parameter. Sixth would be the weight. It should be a lightweight motorcycle. 7 should be chassis, a good flexible and strong chassis. 8 would be ergonomics, so how comfortable a rider feels on the bike. And 9th would be non-intrusive electronics, if there are any, on the motorcycle, right? So now that we've set up all these 9 parameters, let's try and assess the Desert X on these 9 parameters and see how it fares, right? So let's jump right in. First one is suspension travel. If you look at any motocross or adventure trail motorcycle, and by the way guys, I'm not going to compare the Desert X with Africa Twins and the Triumph Tiger 900 Rally Pros or the Yamaha Tenere and all, because that's not a decent comparison as per me. I think if we are talking about off-road capabilities, let's try and compare it with the benchmark in the off-road capability, and let's compare it against the motocross and adventure or trail motorbikes, right? Okay, so suspension travel. Any motocross or adventure trail bike would have about 330 to 350 mm of front travel, and somewhere close to about 300 250 to 300 mm of rear travel, right? The Desert X, I think, comes equipped for this parameter. It comes with about 230 mm of front travel and 220 mm of rear monoshock travel. Why do we need a good suspension travel, right? A good suspension travel is needed to ensure that all the undulations on the rough terrain are soaked up well by the bike and not transferred to the rider while riding, right? Unsettling the rider. So I think I would rate the Desert X about 4 out of 5 on the suspension travel bit. It fared really well. There was not a single moment where my suspension bottomed out while doing these trails, right? The second would be suspension setup. Let's not spend much time here because the Desert X has, comes absolutely ready to be tuned to how you want the suspension to be set up yourself, right? So it's fully customizable for preload, rebound and compression. Just out of the box, I think it comes a bit plush, the suspension setup. And I found on my bike at least, the rear was a bit bouncy. So I'll have to definitely tune it up for my comforts as we move along. But I'll give the suspension setup a strong rating, again 4 out of 5. The third one is ground clearance, right? I mean, the Dex has a substantial 250 mm of ground clearance, which is absolutely good enough. I went through really rough terrains, and not a single moment I experienced where I found the bottom plate or the bash plate bottoming out, or me kind of beaching onto any area. So I would rate the Desert X again very high, or let's say a 4.5 on ground clearance. Now, before we talk about tires, let's talk about power delivery here. If you see in this video here, I basically had lost my rhythm and I was stuck on a steep incline. And because I was riding in the rally mode, there was just too much power and there was wheel spin, right? So I wasn't getting enough traction. So what I did here is, got a friend to kind of help clear some, stones and rubble from under the wheel, and then changed the mode and came back to the enduro mode to basically then climb that incline, and it was then extremely easy to kind of go up that steep incline, right? So on power delivery, if I were to kind of rate Desert X, I think Desert X's secret magic sauce lies in the power delivery, right? I would give a very strong 5 out of 5 rating for Desert X here. Because if you move on to if you ride in the rally mode, it will give you absolute fun element on flat sandy kind of surfaces where there will be more than enough drifts on the rear, enough to create that drama and excitement, but at the same time not scaring the rider off or putting the rider off the bike, right? So it's the rally mode is all excitement, and the enduro mode is perfect for difficult terrains where with absolutely broken terrain or big boulders and rocks and all. If you are traversing through, I think enduro mode is the right mode because it cuts down on your power and provides you enough torque to kind of scale through these difficult areas at low speeds and low RPM, right? So power delivery, I think, is the secret sauce for the Desert X. I would rate it very high. Now coming back to the tire space, right? What would a good off-road bike need from a tire standpoint? A, the tires should be knobby to give you good grip on off-road trails. B, the front tire should be larger in diameter and slimmer, because a slimmer and a larger, taller tire would help cut through the difficult terrains and rough terrains easily without unsettling the front and the rider much. Universally, the standard used on off-road bikes, motocross and trail and adventure bikes, is a 21-inch front and an 18 or a 19-inch rear. That's the standard. And I think Desert X has come prepared again for this battle too. So it comes, for the first time, Ducati has come up with a 21-inch front and an 18-inch rear combo. So I'll rate it somewhere close to about 3.5 to 4 stars, and I'm rating it 3.5 to 4 stars and not 5 because it comes with Pirelli STRs just out of the box, because and these Pirelli STRs are somewhere in between, right? They are not hardcore off-road tires, neither are these hardcore on-road tires. They are a good compromise between both. Personally, I love them, but they are just a compromise. I mean, they are not the right tires for off-road. Okay, so moving on, I think the next would be weight as a parameter, and this is where I will rate the Desert X extremely low. I would give it 2 out of 5 stars because it weighs about 223 kgs to 225 kgs curb weight, which is the wet weight. So I strongly suggest that before hitting a trail, you reduce the fuel weight and carry just enough fuel for the trail. Don't go and hit the trail with the full fuel tank, because it becomes difficult to maneuver a heavy motorcycle on off-road trails, right? And if you compare it with any motocross or trail bike, typically a motocross or a trail bike would weigh anywhere between 100 to 130 kgs, right? So there's a whole 100 kgs difference between the Desert X and a benchmark here. So I would rate it low here. Moving on to chassis, the chassis on the Desert X are designed to perfection, and I think it shows in the way she handles. It's extremely balanced. The chassis would typically instill that confidence in the rider, and about the machine's ability to handle impact and load bearing in tough conditions, right? Basically, the chassis needs to be strong enough, and at the same time, be extremely good when it comes to its vulnerable points and impact prone areas, and yet have the flexibility to flex while traversing through those big rocks and sudden drops, etc. So I think that Desert X performed brilliantly in this area. I would rate it a solid 5 out of 5. Ergonomics, I would rate it 3 out of 5. And if you ask me what is needed for a good off-road machine ergonomically, the riding position should be commanding. And when I say commanding, I mean the rider should sit higher on the motorcycle, because that will give a good control on the overall bike. The handlebars should be wide enough to traverse through tight terrains, and trails. In this section, I think Desert X, while has a very high, very broader handlebar, one has to reach out to grab the handlebar. So it's not a very comfortable riding position, right? I mean, I had my shoulders hurting after 1 hour of this kind of trail that I did, right? So the seat is also tucked low and down. So moving on the bike forward and back, does not come to you naturally on this bike. But these are some of the minor drawbacks of trying to find a middle ground between an on-road and an off-road bike, right? A flat seat which comes as an accessory might solve this issue, but it's still, there is still room for improvement ergonomically, is what I feel on the deck. So I'd rate it a 3 out of 5. Electronics, I think this would be a straight 5 out of 5, because the enduro mode is good enough for technical trails, and the rally mode is good when it comes to going through flat sandy surfaces, right, at a good pace. You can customize everything from traction control, wheelie control, ABS to power output and engine braking, etc., right? From an off-road standpoint, the important features would be ABS, traction and power output, and all these can be customized as per your comfort on the Desert X. One can also toggle through different modes while on the go. So I think electronically also it's definitely the Ducati supremacy here, and I would rate it extremely high. Let's come to now the final verdict and how I feel the bike performed overall. I would rate it at 4 stars. It's compromised in certain parameters because it has to don 2 very different roles: a good mid-sized touring motorcycle and a capable off-road machine. Both these roles demand very different mechanical aspects for good performance, and finding a better than average baseline should be considered as a big win for the Ducati engineers, frankly. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely give it 2 thumbs up. It's a good machine. I would rate it 4 stars out of 5 overall. That's my final verdict. Hope you guys enjoyed this quick insight, and thanks for sticking for so long and giving your time. Enjoy this sunset view. And if you have any questions, if you want to know anything more about this machine, do feel free to revert or comment on this video, and I'll get back to you, right? Thanks. Bye-bye.